Todd Dunn here for Life on the Edge. This is my second video in my solar panel for an RV series. After the first video, which ran to 35 minutes, I've come to the realization that that video may have been a little bit information dense. It also perhaps suffered a little bit from the fact that I am a retired geochemistry professor, and I kind of assume that everybody has a background in college level physics, calculus, quantum mechanics, things like that. So I'm going to back off a little bit on the content of the presentations, and instead of giving one video that covers everything else about putting a solar array on your RV, I'm going to break it up into a series of short videos so that there isn't quite as much information density, and it'll provide you with just a little bit of information about each specific area. This is the first of those short videos. It's about solar panels. Solar panels come in three types: monocrystalline, polycrystalline, and thin film. This is also the order of the development of the technology of solar panels. Monocrystalline came first, followed by polycrystalline, and more recently by thin film panels. So what are the basic attributes of these types of panels? First, monocrystalline panels have the highest efficiency. That means they're physically the smallest for a given output. They're more expensive than polycrystalline panels, and on Amazon today I found prices for a 100-watt panel ranging from about $115 to $140, with most of them clustered around $120. So that's about $1.20 a watt. Polycrystalline panels have a little bit lower efficiency than monocrystalline panels, which makes them about 10% bigger. They do have a different footprint though, which I'll show you in the next slide. They're less expensive. Amazon prices ranged from about $85 to $100 for 100-watt panels. Most of them were around $100, so about $1 a watt. Finally, there are thin film panels. In theory, these are the cheapest panels to make, but they're still relatively new, so they're not really that cheap. They are the least efficient by far. Their efficiency is about 1/4 that of monocrystalline panels. They are the most expensive. The cheapest panel I found was about $130 for 100 watts, and there were some that were up to $5, $6, even $10 a watt, so $500, $600, $1,000 for a 100-watt panel. These panels, though, are designed to use on roofs of buildings, and they tend to come in narrow strips about 16 inches wide to span a stud bay on a roof, and up to 10 or even 15 feet long. Okay, let's look at the different types of 100-watt panels in a little more detail. On the left-hand side of the slide, I have relative sizes of monocrystalline, polycrystalline, and thin film panels. I've drawn the thin film panel as 3 strips side by side to form more of a rectangle, although in reality it would be a long thin strip that wouldn't really fit on my slide. You can see that the monocrystalline panel is narrower and longer than the polycrystalline panel, but it's about 10% smaller in area. The numbers on the little outlines of panels are relative areas, where the monocrystalline is 100, polycrystalline is 110, and a thin film panel is 247% of the size of the monocrystalline panel. So much lower efficiency. They're going to take a lot of space. Consequently, not a good choice for an RV solar system. So let's look at these individual panels in detail. Monocrystalline. Cost, as I said before, ranges from about $110, $112 to about $140 right now on April 16, 2017. Those are Amazon prices. You might be able to do better going directly to some of the suppliers. A typical 100-watt monocrystalline panel is about 21 by 47 inches. Its operating voltage is about 19 volts, and it runs at about 5 1/4 amps at full output. These are the best panels for low light. They have good durability. Pretty much everyone I looked at had a 5-year absolute guarantee and a 25-year output guarantee. These panels are also rigid and tend to have aluminum frames. Polycrystalline panels are a little bit cheaper. The price range I found today was $85 to $112 for a 100-watt panel. They have a physically different footprint, as you can see from my little diagram on the left, from a monocrystalline panel. They're wider and shorter. They're about 27 inches by 40 to 41 inches. They tend to operate at a little bit lower voltage, around 18 volts, and slightly higher amperage to generate 100 watts of 5.6 amps. They're good in low light, but not as good as monocrystalline panels. They have good durability and the same guarantees as monocrystalline panels for all the ones I looked at. They're also rigid with aluminum frames. They do physically look a little bit different. Then thin film panels. As I said, these are probably not a good choice. For 100 watts, they start around $150, $130, and they go way up. The smallest footprint you could get for 100 watts would be about 48 by 53 inches. So that's 2.5 times the size of a monocrystalline panel. They run at about the same voltage and amperage as polycrystalline panels. They're not as good in low light. They're less durable because of the way they're built. Part of that's because they tend to be mounted on flexible substrates. In fact, you can roll these panels up. That's one of the good things about them. If you want a panel that you can take out and lay out, for example, in a portable setup away from the RV, these might not be a bad choice because you can roll them up and they take up quite a bit less space than a rigid panel. But they are going to require a lot more space on the ground. Okay, another comment in general, 12-volt panels, which are the ones that operate at around 18 to 19 volts, are available up to about 160 watts. If you get a bigger panel than that, they're what are called 24-volt panels, and they usually have an operating voltage up around 30 volts. That will be important later on when we start talking about solar charge controllers. Now let's look at the relative sizes of panels at different wattages. This diagram shows a 100-watt monocrystalline panel, a 160-watt monocrystalline panel, and a 260-watt monocrystalline panel. Remember, the 100-watt panel is about 4 feet long. So these higher output panels get pretty big. 260-watt panels are typically the size that are used in home solar arrays on the roofs of houses. So they're quite large, and most RVs probably don't have space for more than 1 or 2 of these panels at most, and they're certainly not sized adequately for use in a portable array. In addition, the 260-watt panels are all 24-volt panels. That means that you're going to have to use an MPPT controller. Another comment that I want to make is, in general, you should not mix different size or voltage panels when you're setting up a solar system. In other words, don't mix 100 and 160 watt panels. If you think you need 260 watts, either buy 3 100 watt panels or 2 160 watt panels, or a 260 watt panel. And if you thought maybe you needed 350 watts, don't buy a 100 watt panel and a 260 watt panel. Buy 4 100 watt panels or perhaps 2 160s and live with the slightly lower output. So you want to make sure that you use all the same panels in your solar array. The last thing I want to talk about for solar panels is how you can wire them. There are basically 3 options. You can wire them on what's called parallel, where you connect the positive output of one panel to the positive output of the next panel, and the negative output of the 2 panels together, and then from there you go to the positive and negative inputs of the solar controller. This wiring style, parallel wiring, will double the amperage going into the solar controller, but leave the volts unchanged. So if you had 200-watt panels that operated at 5¼ amps and 19 volts, if you wire them in parallel, you'll still be operating at 19 volts, but you'll be at about 10½ amps. The next option is what's called series wiring, where you tie two panels together by going from the negative of one panel to the positive of the other. Then you go from the negative that's unattached on a panel to the negative on the controller, and the unattached positive on the other panel to the positive on the controller. This has the effect of doubling the voltage of the solar array, but leaving the amps that are coming out unchanged. So our 200-watt panels would be operating at about 38 volts, but still 5¼ amps. The reason to do this is twofold. One, if you're using an MPPT controller, which you would have to in this case to charge a 12-volt system, you'll get a little bit better low light performance out of the array. Also, because you're still only running at 5¼ amps, you can use smaller wires to connect the array to the charge controller. Finally, you can use a combination wiring scheme called series parallel. In this case, I've taken 4 panels. They're set up into 2 pairs. Each pair is connected in series. And then the outputs of the open negative outputs are combined and go to the negative input of the controller. The open positive outputs are combined and go to the positive input of the controller. This doubles the voltage and doubles the amperage. The only time you would do this is if you want, for example, to keep your voltage a little bit lower going into an MPPT controller. 400-watt panels would be operating up around 76 volts, and if you had an MPPT controller that had an upper limit of 60 volts, you wouldn't want to run them all in series. So by going to series parallel, you could get them down to 38 volts, and in this case 11 amps. So when you do series parallel of 4 panels, the volts are doubled and the amps are doubled. You can, of course, parallel more than 2 panels together. That'll just make the amps from each of the panels will be additive. So if you parallel 3 panels together, instead of 5 amps each, you'll get about 15 amps from the 3. If you parallel 4 panels, you get 20 amps, and so on. You can also put more panels in series, which will raise the voltage while keeping the amperage low, which allows you to continue to use small wires and gives you some additional advantages in low light. But you will have to watch out for the maximum voltage input on your controller. Most MPPT controllers, as we'll see in a later presentation, are limited to 70 or 100 volts maximum solar array voltage. Okay, that finishes up what I'm going to say about solar panels. So the next time we're going to move on to wires, switches, circuit breakers, that aspect of connecting the system up. And I'm going to talk about how to size your wiring and where to put your switches and circuit breakers. Okay, thank you. I hope this shorter presentation has been a little bit more comprehensible than the half-hour one, since it's only limited to solar panels. And if you liked it, click the thumbs up button. Subscribe if you would like to. I'd appreciate it. You can look forward to another presentation probably tomorrow. And I will put these all in a playlist.